contribution to the growth of the global economy. Let me remind you that our unemployment rate is at a low level of 5.2%. The central bank's reserves keep growing. The central bank's reserves have reached $412 billion. Our federal revenue has grown by 40%, and this despite the fact that our inflation rate is quite low, about 4.4%. All this makes us quite optimistic, even though I should say that this is not an absolutely stable trend. We should make sure that this trend continues. We need to maintain this growth trend, and I have every reason to believe that we'll be able to do so. Next question.
Interfax. Mr. President, everyone was glued to screen following your meeting with President Trump. How do you assess the outcome of this meeting? It's no secret that in Poland there was quite a harsh criticism of the American president, and its mass media was quite hostile towards it. And what about the supposed intervention of Russia into the U.S. elections? Did you make peace?
The U.S. President did raise the question regarding this issue, and we did talk about it. This was not just a single issue. We spoke at length about these issues. You are aware of our position. I reiterated it. There is no reason to believe that Russia meddled in U.S. elections. But what is important here is that we have agreed that the situation of uncertainty, especially going forward, we should avoid this kind of situation in these matters. This is what I said at our last session. This is directly related to cyberspace, internet, resources, and so on. We have agreed with the U.S. President that we will set up a working group and we'll work together on cybersecurity. We will make sure that international rules are maintained. We need to prevent meddling into other countries' affairs. Of course, primarily we're talking about Russia and the United States here. We believe that if we are able to set up this mechanism, and I have no reason to doubt it, there will be no more speculation on this subject. And you also asked about our personal relationship. I think we were able to establish a relationship. I don't know how it will sound, but let me just tell you what I really think. The Trump you see on TV is very different from Trump the real person. He is very specific. He is able to understand what you tell him. He analyzes your words pretty quickly, and he is able to respond. He answers your questions, or he responds to whatever may come up in the course of discussion. So I think if we keep going like that, if we keep building our relationship the way we did yesterday, there is every reason to believe that we will be able to restore, at least partially, the level of interaction that we need.
Микрофон возьмите, пожалуйста. Спасибо большое. Развитие вот этого ответа. Да, меня зовут Райан из телекомпании CBS.
I represent CBS, and my question is that to follow up on your response, when you denied Russian intervention into the American election, did President Trump agree with your position? Did he accept this position?
Well, what he did is he asked a lot of questions about this, and I responded to all those questions as much as I could. So I think that he did accept what I said, but you have to ask him what he thinks about all this.
Not speaking about G20, but a question on domestic policy. What's your attitude to Mr. Navalny and his activity? And when do you...
Well, I think we can have a dialogue, especially at the presidential level, at the government level. We can only talk to people who have a constructive agenda, even if they are critical. But if it's a person who only wants to attract attention to himself, I'm not interested in this kind of dialogue. Next question.
Argument and Fact newspaper. This morning you had a meeting with the French president and German chancellor. I can only suppose that detailed account that you discussed in detail situation in Ukraine. Is there any news? Is there a hope that the situation in to its resolution better compared to how it is now? And the discussion that started of this situation with the U.S. president, how is it going? Or do interests of the U.S. and Russia are very different in regards to Ukraine and the issue of the conflict? As I am suggesting that given the background of the U.S. envoy on this issue,
Russia's interests and Ukraine's interests, the interests of the Russian people and the Ukrainian people, and I strongly believe this, I absolutely believe this, coincide. Our interests totally coincide. There may be a difference between the leadership, today's leadership of Ukraine and certain political forces in Ukraine. But if we look at the situation objectively, we'll see that both Russia and Ukraine are interested in cooperation. We are both interested in combining our competitive advantages. We are both interested in developing our economies. Simply because we inherited a lot from the Soviet past. I mean, cooperation, economic integration. We share the same infrastructure, the same transport system, basically everything. Unfortunately, our Ukrainian colleagues neglect this today, and they have only one asset left which they offer on the market today, and this is Russophobia. And one more thing. They also trade in the policy of dividing Russia and Ukraine, separating these two nations, separating these two peoples. Some people in the West like this. Some people think that they should do their best to separate Ukraine from Russia. That's why today's Ukrainian leadership actively offers this asset on the market, and they're quite good at it, but sooner or later this will come to an end. In any case, we are interested in seeing this situation and as soon as possible. As regards the U.S. role in the Ukrainian settlement, we did discuss this with President Trump, and we have agreed, well, this has already happened. There will be a special envoy appointed by the Trump administration, and this person will deal with this matter on a regular basis. He will maintain contact with Russia, Ukraine, and all the stakeholders.
TASS agency. Mr. President, I want to ask you about Middle East. The situation there is developing, well, it includes Syria, Qatar, and other countries. As for Syria, you probably had discussions on Syria within the G20 summit framework. And following the recent meeting in Astana, what's your assessment of the prospects for Syrian settlement? Has there been any change? Maybe there has been a change for a more constructive dialogue, given the yesterday and today's meetings. And about Qatar, what's your assessment of the prospects for this country? Was it discussed at G20? And if I may ask...
You need a whole report, right?
It's a rare opportunity. So speaking about the policy, anti-terrorism policy, as far as I know, agreeing the communique on terrorism was quite difficult to discuss. Why?
Frankly, I'm not aware of those difficulties. You should talk to Sherpas about this. I don't know. I don't think there are any fundamental differences. It may be just some technical differences, some formulas. As far as I know, the text has been agreed, at least at the level of presidents, at the level of the heads of state. We didn't have any difficulty. Everybody realizes that this is a common threat, and everybody says that they are ready to fight this threat. As regards Qatar, we did not discuss this issue. Of course, it's a quite acute problem, a regional problem, and it can have an effect on certain problems, energy, for example, and security in the region. But I did not discuss this issue with anybody at this summit. As regards Syria, yes, almost with all my counterparts, we discussed this issue at our meetings. Whether the U.S. has changed its position on Syria, I would say that America's position is more pragmatic now. On the whole, it doesn't seem like it has changed a lot, but there is some understanding that we can achieve a lot by joining our forces. And as a result, we have reached this agreement on the southern de-escalation zone. Regardless of what people think about this, I can tell you that this is really a breakthrough that we've been able to achieve working with President Trump. This is a practical result of our work together with the United States. We also got Jordan and some other regional countries involved in this work. We had consultations with Israel, and we will continue consultations in the near future. But this is a real positive result. You may say this is even a breakthrough. So if we continue making progress in other areas like that, if we make progress with other de-escalation zones. For example, we discussed this matter in detail with the Turkish president today. To a large extent, this does not depend on us. This is not up to us. There are some differences between regional players. All those countries have their concerns, have their preferences, have their interests, after all, and those are legitimate interests, mind you. And that's the way we should treat them. We should treat them as legitimate interests, so we should be looking for a compromise, and sometimes we are able to do that. In any case, the fact that hostilities have ceased and we have those de-escalation zones, we discussed them, this is in and of itself a big step forward. What we need now is come to an agreement regarding the specific borders of those zones and how we are going to ensure security within those zones. This is, you might say, boring work, but it's extremely important. And based on the positive experience that we've accumulated recently using goodwill of Iran, Turkey, and of course the Syrian government and President Assad, we are able to make progress. Most importantly, and we reiterated this in our documents regarding this southern de-escalation zone that borders on Jordan and adjacent Golan Heights. The most important thing is that we ensure Syria's territorial integrity in the end. These de-escalation zones should be like territories that can work together and work with the official Damascus. If we are able to do that, we will certainly have a strong foundation for resolving the Syrian problem through political means. RIA Novosti, okay. Question from RIA Novosti.
РИА Новости. We spoke about supposed Russian intervention into the election, but there will be elections in Germany. Here in Germany, there's going to be election. Is Russia planning to intervene in these elections? And did you notify Angela Merkel about how you're going to do it? Maybe you can tell me.
It's a provocative question you're asking. Well, like I told you, we never meddled in the US election. Why should we meddle in Germany? We have very good relations with Germany. This is our #1 trade partner at a national level in Europe. One of our biggest trade partners worldwide. And we have projects that we support. For example, Nord Stream 2, there's a lot of speculation and myths related to this project. But in any case, it's very obvious that this project will benefit the European economy and the Germany's economy, because Germany has abandoned nuclear energy, as you know. So why should we meddle in Germany's elections, Germany's politics? If you look at the media, at the German media, I mean, or at the European, French media, what they do is they meddle in our affairs all the time, but we are confident. That's why this doesn't bother us. NBC News. Your question. Are you NBC News? So you will ask your question together? Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for the chance to ask your questions from our TV company. What we wanted to ask is your meeting with President Trump. My colleague already asked it, but we still figured we wanted to ask that we should ask President Trump what happened.
You have to ask him what he thinks about this. You said what happened. Nothing happened. We did not meddle.
But unfortunately, the White House does not release any information.
Okay, we'll talk to the White House. We'll tell them to fix that.
But could you perhaps share what President Trump told you when you told him that you did not intervene into the election?
Well, he started asking all sorts of questions. He was interested in particular details. So I answered his questions in as much detail as I was able to. I told him about my conversations with the previous administration on the issue, including my conversations with President Obama. But, of course, I don't think I can share the details of my conversations with President Obama. You don't do this generally, and it would be improper for me to tell you in detail what we talked about with President Trump. He asked a question, I responded to this question. He asked a few more questions, and I gave him my answers, and I think he was satisfied with my answers.
Vedomosti newspaper, speaking about the economic growth, the government has already prepared the plan, and as far as I know, you are aware of it, but it's secret, it's kept secret, and we don't know why. And you just shared some details of it.
Okay, let me explain. I guess you know that we have several different groups of experts working on the economic plan. There is a group led by Mr. Titov. He works with businessmen, with the business community. Then there is another group led by Mr. Kudrin. He has a large number of experts in his group. And then there is the government. And we should come up with a plan that would be acceptable, that would be optimal for what we are going to do with our economy after 2018. And we have to consider all the proposals, we have to evaluate all those plans and then make the final decision. So maybe we will not just pick one of the three options that we are offered. We may combine certain things from all these different options. But in any case, this is work in progress. We just don't want to anticipate anything. We don't want to say anything prematurely, but the government has done a lot of work on this plan, and of course we will rely heavily on the plan proposed by the government, but we will also take into consideration what was proposed by the Kudrin group and by the Titov group. They also have certain good ideas. So currently we are looking at all those plans and trying to define the final plan for Russia's economic development after 2018. There is no secret about this plan. It's just that we don't want to announce certain things before we make a final decision, because we can send a wrong kind of signal to the economy by doing that.
Известия newspaper, a question on foreign policy. As far as I know, you know of the cortege car, and it's planned to be used after 2018.
You know more about this than I do, because obviously you've read everything about it. I have no plan to use this car, this vehicle. You never want to ride in a vehicle that hasn't been tested, so I suggest that you test it first, and then I may use it later. Next question, please. RT.
Russia Today, you already mentioned your meeting with President Erdogan. I'd like to ask a question. When you talked about the northern zone, did you discuss the Kurdish issue and the territory where the Russian representatives are present observing? And the Turkish media are already whipping up the atmosphere for intervention of Turkey in that area. And did you discuss with President Erdogan the future of Syrian President Bashar Assad, whether he will be part of the political future of Syria?
Well, let me start with your last question. Mr. Tillerson is a very respected person, and he has a Russian order, the order of friendship. We respect him and we love him, but he is not a citizen of Syria. And the future of Syria has to be decided by the people of Syria, and the future of President Assad should be decided by the Syrian people. That's number one. Number two, as regards the Kurdish issue, this is a big and complex problem, and we maintain contacts with many Kurdish groups, and we make no secret of it. But as regards combat support for these groups, our U.S. colleagues are far ahead of us in this respect. They do this a lot more often. Our advisors or our servicemen who monitor ceasefire, yes, they are present in many areas in Syria, in the areas where we have reached an agreement on truce, a ceasefire. But the areas that you mentioned, there is a very insignificant number, maybe one or two. We don't have any units there. It's just a small number of individuals. And the function that they perform, everybody benefits from it. But at this point, we don't see any plans for launching any offensive or anything like that. On the contrary, we expect that our preliminary understanding on de-escalation zones in certain areas like Idlib and in the northern Syria, we hope that this agreement will be reached, and we can never do this without Turkey. Okay, next question.
NTV company. My colleagues already mentioned Trump's words in Warsaw, and there was also his statement of delivering liquid gas to Poland and Europe. How do you assess this statement, especially in the context of the Nord Stream project? Will there be more tensions because of it?
I think this is an extremely positive development, because healthy competition benefits everybody. We always support open market and healthy competition. The U.S. President spoke yesterday at the session and said that the U.S. wants to have honest and fair competition. And actually, when I spoke, I supported him. I agreed with that. We are quite happy with it. Today, if this is what they do, if we have open and fair competition, if it's not biased, if it's not politicized, and if they don't use any political instruments, we would be quite happy with that, because as of today, and this is very obvious, the cost of production and the delivery of liquefied natural gas from the US to Russia is much higher than Russian LNG. And then Russian LNG cannot compete with Russian natural gas delivered through our pipelines. So we clearly have a competitive advantage. And for us to preserve those advantages, our market partners should work actively for us to preserve this competitive advantage. So let's conclude now. The last question, please.
Russia channel. After your first meeting with President Trump, do you think it will be possible to for the Russian-American relations to come out of that deep crisis it's been in?
Well, I really hope that we'll be able to do that. And I think we can see some positive signs even right now. Thank you very much.